Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I first, on behalf of the Fairfax County Police Department, our entire county government, and all the residents of Fairfax County, want to express our thoughts, prayers. I know that sounds anemic given the gravity of what happened in Buffalo and what happened yesterday in Texas, but all of our thoughts and prayers are with those communities and their families as they go through unimaginable suffering right now. I'm joined today by the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Jessica Aber. I'm also joined by the FBI Washington Field Office Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Tim Tebow. And I want to acknowledge a couple folks. I know at least one is here. Our own FCPD Detective Kevin Reynolds. He worked on the case that you're about to hear about, and he worked hand in glove with Special Agent Brandon Strait of the FBI Washington Field Office and Special Agent Patrick May of the FBI Washington Field Office. You're going to hear in detail from U.S. Attorney Jess Aber the facts of this case. But I first want to start by saying what I typically say at moments like this. I've been in this business for over 3 decades now. I've been in the DMV and the National Capital Region my entire career, and I've traveled the country, and I've been able to observe the strength of relationships with local, state, and federal law enforcement and prosecutors across this country, and there's no other jurisdiction in the country that comes close to the strength of the relationships and partnerships that exist here in the National Capital Region. This place is very special. It has to be by virtue of our boundaries and the proximity with one another, and by virtue that those who commit criminal offenses don't honor geographical boundaries. So whether it's the FBI or the DEA or the U.S. Secret Service or the U.S. Marshal Service, Homeland Security, our relationship with all those federal law enforcement partners is strong. Our relationship with the Eastern District of Virginia, U.S. Attorney's Office is strong as well. So the presence of Jessica Aber here today is meaningful for this entire jurisdiction. I also want to highlight the existence of something that's very unique in law enforcement across the country, and that's a full-time overdose investigations unit. Fairfax County Police Department in August of 2018 did something really innovative and creative and responsive to a problem that's grown even more since 2018, and that's the non-fatal and fatal overdose issues that our community and others across the country are challenged with. So we have a Second Lieutenant Robert Shelton and 6 detectives, and all they do is respond to, follow up, and investigate non-fatal and fatal overdoses in Fairfax County. And it's because of their expertise and their full-time dedication to that very serious epidemic that exists here and elsewhere that we're able to realize these important moments and put people who belong in prison in prison. And then lastly, before I turn it over to the U.S. Attorney, I just want to acknowledge, we have a 29-year-old female victim who died in the case that you're about to hear about, and she's not coming back. She's no longer with her friends and her family and her community, but it's with her in mind that you'll hear Julian Velasquez has pleaded and has been sentenced to 22 years in federal prison, and it's with her in mind that Comsty has been sentenced to 21 months in prison. That the strength of the federal statute is why we're here today, and that federal statute that they pleaded guilty to reads distribution of mixture and substance containing a detectable amount of fentanyl, a Schedule II controlled substance resulting in serious bodily injury or, in this particular case, death. So I'll now turn it over to the U.S. Attorney, and she'll turn it over to ASAC Tim Tebow, and then we'll stand ready to take any questions you may have.
Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking our partners in this case, obviously Fairfax County Police and the FBI's Washington Field Office. Thank you specifically to the Chief for hosting us, and to both him and Assistant Special Agent in Charge Tim Tebow for taking the time on this really important issue. Yesterday, as the Chief said, Julian Velasquez was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison by a federal district judge for distributing fentanyl that resulted in the death of a young woman in August of 2020. guilty. Mr. Velasquez provided the victim with a counterfeit pressed Xanax pill laced with fentanyl, which she took while she was a guest in his residence, and the victim subsequently suffered an overdose, and Mr. Velasquez found her unresponsive. But instead of immediately assisting her, Mr. Velasquez continued to sell drugs to 2 more customers and had a friend help him hide the evidence of the victim's death and drug distribution and use before calling 911. During that call to 911, Mr. Velasquez lied to first responders and denied the possibility that the victim had suffered an overdose. This was not, though, even the first overdose incident resulting from drugs distributed by Mr. Velasquez. In addition to 2 non-fatal overdoses, narcotics distributed by Mr. Velasquez are linked to 2 more fatal overdoses occurring in 2017 and 2018. I hope that the knowledge that this offender, that Mr. Velasquez, will be spending over 2 decades in prison for his crimes, where he cannot distribute drugs in our community, will bring some measure of comfort to our community and to the families of these victims. Now, although the level of disregard for human life and well-being demonstrated by Mr. Velasquez is frankly striking, unfortunately, too many details of this case are becoming more and more common. Drug dealers are lacing less potent drugs, including pills, all across our communities with fentanyl, often without the knowledge of their customers, to increase effects and the value of their products. As you may have heard, it takes only 2 milligrams, that is a mere dusting of fentanyl, to kill someone. And we have a tide of overdose deaths across our nation. According to a May 11, 2022 release by the CDC, overdoses, not only from deaths by synthetic opioids, including fentanyl, had increased between 2020 and 2021, and that in 2021, national deaths resulting from synthetic opioids outpaced overdose deaths from cocaine and psychostimulants like meth combined. Substance abuse disorder is an issue in this country, obviously, and that's why we all wanted to have this press conference, because it is an issue that crosses gender, race, age, and socioeconomic lines. And although addiction is part of the issue, with fentanyl-laced products, pills, becoming more and more common, it now only takes 1 instance of fentanyl exposure to result in death. Now, this is a problem that my office, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia, and our partners take very seriously. We are pushing hard to take on cases like this involving fentanyl and other synthetic opioids, and we are currently prosecuting multiple cases involving overdoses caused by fentanyl and other synthetic opioids in the Northern Virginia region. We are targeting not just street-level distributors, but also darknet marketplaces and vendors that are shipping pills and raw material through the mails into our communities. Our efforts also target larger drug trafficking organizations that ship fentanyl and other synthetic opioids into the United States across national lines. But none of these efforts would be possible without the hard work done by our investigative partners, including the FBI, Fairfax Police Department, our other local and state partners, as well as other federal partners, including the DEA, who all work tirelessly to identify offenders, gather evidence, and help us shape these cases for prosecution. In conclusion, I am deeply appreciative of all of their efforts, and I am grateful for their partnership going forward as we continue to tackle this vital and very complex issue. With that, I will turn the podium over to Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Tim Tebow. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Davis and U.S. Attorney Aber. Good afternoon. I'm Tim Tebow. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in Charge at the Washington Field Office. I'd just like to foot stomp what the Chief said. The relationship between the FBI and the Fairfax County Police Department is strong and it's healthy and it's enduring. It's been something that we've seen. It's not new. We've worked with them for years and we'll continue, not only in these type of cases, but also gang cases, cyber-related cases, and financial crime cases. We're grateful to the chief and the Fairfax County Police, as well as U.S. Attorney Aber and the Eastern District of Virginia, for holding this press conference to call attention to this important issue. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the significant sentence that Julian Velasquez received yesterday for distributing counterfeit drugs that led to the death of a young woman. His actions also contributed to the fatal and non-fatal overdoses of several others. I'd like to start by offering my condolences to the families of the victims in this case. Even one fatal overdose is too many. The FBI's Washington Field Office is committed to working with our partners in the Fairfax County Police Department and other local law enforcement agencies to prevent overdoses from illegal drugs. On the prevention side, the Washington Field Office's community outreach program and case agents work to educate the public about the dangers of counterfeit narcotics that can be laced with deadly substances, including fentanyl, as in this case. We want to warn people in our communities that if you are buying drugs on the dark web or other unlicensed sources, you are potentially playing Russian roulette, because drug dealers are lacing virtually every drug with deadly fentanyl, which is readily available and cheap. And the victim in this case, she came from California. She had round-trip tickets, okay? But she only used one of them. She planned to go back home, and she was friends with the subject here. So it can happen to anybody if you're using these substances. It's dangerous not only to the users, but to the EMTs and law enforcement who respond to the overdoses. The FBI is also working with our partners and local police departments and the U.S. Attorney's Office to aggressively pursue and bring justice to dealers like Velasquez, who take advantage of those who are suffering from opioid addictions. According to the CDC's most recent released data, drug overdose deaths topped 100,000 annually in 2021, most of which were due to opioids. Fairfax County PD has done an outstanding job handling the proliferating number of these overdose deaths and bringing the most egregious cases to our attention so that the perpetrators can be charged federally. Yesterday's sentencing should serve as a warning to those who distribute dangerous and deadly drugs in our communities. We will not rest until we hold them accountable for their actions. No one agency can tackle this problem alone, and as in this case demonstrates, the Washington Field Office will continue to partner to prevent the distribution and use of counterfeit drugs and to bring those who commit these crimes to justice. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to the chief.
Questions? Scott?
Yeah, Chief, a couple things. I know that you probably want to be sure our audience understands, because part of this case was live, it was deceptive in the critical moments when medical care could have been maybe given or more aggressive. I haven't read the case, but there is a Good Samaritan law both in Virginia and our other jurisdictions here. Could you help make it clear that, you know, if you're in an overdose situation, you're not going to be held accountable for calling for help? Is that accurate, or how?
Absolutely. So the Good Samaritan laws, Scott, that you mentioned, and I'm glad you did, exist to protect people who are in a position to get life-saving help for someone experiencing an overdose. So we don't want someone, even if that person himself or herself is partaking in illegal substances or otherwise, involved, we want to take off the table the immediate possibility for arrest for possession of narcotics. And these laws encourage people and allow people to have a pathway to dial 911. In this particular case, and you did hear this correctly, not only did that not take place, but he continued to sell drugs to other customers while our 29-year-old victim lay dead on the floor. That's deplorable. That's despicable. And it says something about his mindset. And that's something that no community will stand for. And that's completely separate, the opposite of the Good Samaritan laws. The Good Samaritan laws are in place to encourage people to call first responders so we can get there. Cops, everyone has Narcan now. Fairfax County Fire and Rescue is world class. We want first responders to get there to help save a life.
And you're not going to go to jail if you make the call.
Absolutely. That's what the Good Samaritan laws are for, and we're proponents of it. This is a harm reduction effort that goes beyond the police department, Fairfax County government. Many aspects of our government are engaged in this fight to reduce non-fatal and fatal overdose. So Good Samaritan laws exist because we want to further reduce harm.
Now, in this case, the federal government was able to step in with their statutes. You have this unit now that deconstructs overdoses in an attempt to find accountability and et cetera. So, and I'm unfamiliar with Virginia state statute. What state statutes might you have to hold people who provided drugs accountable?
The state statutes are not as strong as the federal statutes. So in this particular case, and it's in the whole realm of justice. What is the most amount of justice we can receive for this victim who overdosed and died when that shouldn't have happened? So the strength of the federal statutes is something that we took advantage of in this particular case. We prosecute people locally with the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office routinely, and we also rely on our partnerships with federal law enforcement and the U.S. Attorney's Office and the strength of their statutes to pursue those statutes when it's in the greater pursuit of justice. And that's what happened in this case.
Well, maybe I should ask the question this way. You have an overdose tracking unit. What's the point of that unit? What's the goal with those individuals?
Harm reduction. We want to reduce non-fatal and fatal overdoses in Fairfax County, and we want to hold drug dealers like Mr. Velasquez accountable for his destructive and criminal misconduct. So it's twofold, and we've been in existence, the Overdose Investigations Unit, for almost 4 years now. We are certainly consider ourselves the regional model. We're likely a national model, and I think as time goes by, large jurisdictions in particular will consider standing up a full-time overdose investigations unit. It allows the detectives like Detective Reynolds to develop the expertise that's required to hold people accountable and pursue often very complex investigations so they can be prosecuted appropriately.
And finally, Ms. Aber, I wasn't there for testimony and I haven't reviewed the case, but was it revealed in court, or can you reveal now where this individual got these drugs? And were you able to unspool that, perhaps, Mr. Tebow?
Unfortunately, that's not something that's in the public record, but rest assured that the federal government is always trying to move up in drug organizations. That's how we complement our state partners, and that's what our resources are best meant to do. So I can't speak specifically to this case, but generally that is our intent.
Is the stuff that she was given, had access to, is this common?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, sir. And I'll let my partners speak to that as well. But we have a pill epidemic in this country in which counterfeit pills are being laced with fentanyl. And sometimes the dealer knows it and sometimes the dealer doesn't know it. But that's something that I urge all folks who have children, high schoolers, college students, young people in their young 20s, to have conversations about if you go to a party, someone hands you a pill, you think it's Adderall or Xanax, that could very well have fentanyl in it, and it could very well kill you, just like this young woman in this case was killed. But perhaps Tim could speak to that somewhat about the counterfeit pill scourge.
So I think it's a business decision, right? So fentanyl is much cheaper than going out and getting another, an opioid. So they sprinkle it on. They could sprinkle it on any forms of drugs, Xanax, Adderall, marijuana. So it's dangerous. And so the people that are buying, say, Xanax, they don't know that there's fentanyl sprinkled on. So it's really a business decision made by the producers to sell, to buy cheap and sell high.
Anybody else? Good. All right. Thank you all.